Good morning, everyone. How are you this morning? Anybody ready for some spring? What is this 30-degree weather, 28-degree weather? I'm from Ohio, and they have this up there all the time, but I'm glad I'm here so that we don't have it all the time, but we can have it a lot fewer times down here. Well, welcome. Good to see you guys today. We have a great program for you, and thank you to the All Staff Planning Committee for putting the program together. I have just a few things. As we always do, we want to introduce anybody in the division that has not yet been introduced at a staff development meeting. So if you could stand up, or all staff meeting, if you could stand up, and then we'll get you introduced. Okay, we'll start right here. Go ahead and take it. Tell us who you are, what office you're in, and where you came from.
I'm Joe Smith. I'm with the ESC Call Center. I previously worked at Nelson County Sheriff's Office.
I'm Justin Archie. I also work in the ESC Call Center, and I was a former student and worked at Kroger.
Welcome to both of you.
My name is Crystal Johnson. I work at the Counseling Center, and I originally was in private practice.
Welcome to have you. We turn this down just a hair. Oh, we got new people over here. Have you introduced yourself before? Okay, so Clint just told me to come over here and talk to you. So, what's the best thing about working in West Georgia? Very good. I thought you were going to say I think you were just going to say your supervisor. We're in evaluation time for right here. Oh, you won't get one class. Yeah, no. Great. So just a few things. Anybody else? All right, over here.
Hi, I'm Sophia Jones, and I work in the student program.
Welcome, everyone. Just a few housekeeping items. Remember that evaluations are due February 23rd into HR. That means you have a lot of prep that you need to do prior to that, and you should be well into that process, supervisors, if you aren't yet. And if you aren't, your supervisor should be telling you you need to be well into that process. So now would be the time. Supervisor training on February 14th and 15th, one of those days. You should have gotten information about that. If you haven't, reach out to your supervisor to get that. And then LDI is on February 16th. So anybody that supervises 3 or more people. Remember, we talked a couple of meetings ago, maybe 3 meetings ago, and also 2 meetings ago, about the new meeting structure and the new professional development structure in the division that we had talked about at the Student Affairs Enrollment Management retreat. And we have come to 2 committees came to the conclusions about that meeting structure, and we're implementing that now. And that includes then an LDI structure that goes back to its original intent, which is that those people would either be the second in command in their division, or they would be supervising 3 or more people. So just wanted to remind people of that because that becomes real this week. John, does that still need to turn down a little bit, or is it just me? Okay, great. Okay, well, I'm going to turn it over to Career Services, who's doing a department highlight. So go right ahead.
Good morning. Well, first of all, we're very sad because our amazing presentation that our GA and our student assistant put together will not work over here. So hopefully you will let us show it another time when we get that glitch worked out. First of all, we are Career Services, and of course we're the place where you come to get your internship, your part-time job, your full-time job, whatever you want to be employed. You know, we have little magic boxes in our office, and you just reach in and you take out whatever job you want, and it's going to be the perfect job. Would that not be amazing? That you have a little magic wand and you could just, you would like to bonk them on the head a lot of times, but bonk them on the head and they get their perfect job. That's not quite what we do. It is, we don't give out jobs. And Lauren's going to give you more details about what it is Career Services actually does.
Good morning. So we are divided into 4 different areas in our office. So the first part would be career development. It's where students come and see us for career coaching, internship, job search, career resume, even grad school prep. So if you need help with writing your personal statement, we help with that as well. Our second area is student employment. We employ 1,600 students on campus, and we partner with 19 nonprofits in schools, thank you, Mary Beth, in schools in the community. So if the student really wants to work, there are plenty of opportunities, and we're continuing to grow that program. We also, of course, couldn't operate without our budget manager, thank you, Mary. And then also our employer relations team, which is Ms. Vicki Hartman is over. And so helping our students get employment. So we do put on a lot of career fairs and opportunities to bring employers to campus. We have what is called on-campus recruiting. So we bring employers to campus. We reserve spaces all day so students can actually sign up and have their job interviews here on campus just to make it more convenient for them. So we do a lot of stuff. We also help with workshops around campus. So if ever anyone needs to brush up on a resume, how do I prepare for a mock interview, we do all of those things.
So that you know who our staff is, I'm going to have them all stand, please. Yay. So this is the wonderful Career Services Office. And you guys are, if you are out there looking for someone to come do a workshop for a group, maybe an organization that you sponsor, housing, anybody like that, if you need, these are the people that can take care of you. And we can help our students succeed and get that perfect job that they want somewhere along the way. Thank you.
Okay, Career Service team, if you could, one moment, and then Lauren, I know you didn't know I was going to do this, so I'll be brief. But I wanted to let our division know, congratulations to Career Services with Lauren and the guidance, Vicki and the team. They actually won an award submitted for a program review to NASPA, National Association of Student Personnel Administration, and give them a big round of applause. And Lauren, it was your partnership with athletics, is that correct? Okay, big deal.
Right?
Good morning, everybody. Good morning. So this morning we have Dr. Jeffrey Reber with us, and he's going to speak with us on relationship matters in the workplace. Dr. Jeffrey Reber is chair of the Department of Psychology at the University of West Georgia, a licensed professional counselor, the founder of Relational Counseling and Consulting Services. He is a leader in the field of relational psychology, which treats relationships as fundamental to our being, our knowing, and our morality. He has published 20 articles, 10 book chapters, and 2 books that are informed by this relational psychological perspective, and he has given dozens of presentations on relational psychology across the continent. He has successfully implemented his unique approach to relationships in the classroom, in organizational administration and leadership, and in his psychotherapy practice. He also sits on the editorial boards of 4 academic peer-reviewed publication outlets and served as president of the Society for Theoretical and Philosophical Psychology in 2014. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Jeff Reber.
Thank you very much. If you don't mind, I'm a teacher by profession, professor, so I'm going to imagine all of you as 200 introductory psychology students. That will just help me to get into the mood. Some of you look like you could pass. No. All right. You're welcome. I really appreciate you hosting me this morning. I'm especially appreciative because it's Valentine's Day time, and so relationships are on people's minds more than usual. Now, I have a whole other presentation on developing romantic relationships, which I will spare you. I won't Well, some of you might need that, but I won't do that today. But I do want to talk about relationships that are not romantic, but extremely important, and that is workplace relationships. So I'm going to talk about that a little bit, but I want to start off acknowledging that our Engage West survey is rolling out here in a few weeks, and engagement is really, really a significant and important concern in any workplace, including here at the University of West Georgia. So I want to just run through a few slides really quickly to inform you about some of the data relating to engagement. I'm going to tie that back into relationships. So maybe you know this already, but we're talking about a very large number of people who at some point during the day, the week, the month, the year of their employment, they find themselves pulling back a little bit, more disengaged than their employers would like and than they would probably like, including managers, leaders, administrators. Low engagement is tied to high turnover, and you can see there it's quite costly. When an employee leaves a company or a university, it costs a lot to retrain and hire new people to fill in for that need, maybe 150% of salary even. Absenteeism. Low engagement will affect people's health and well-being so that they are sick more often and less often in their seats at their workplace, at meetings like in this case. And presenteeism. You've probably not heard of presenteeism. This is where people, you probably lived it, but you haven't heard of it. This is where people might be at work, but they're not 100% engaged. They're not 100% efficient because they might be feeling sick, like our lady on the right here, or maybe they're just not really interested in what they're doing. So they're present, they're physically here, but they're not really engaged in their work. Now this may or may not describe some of you, but at least some of the time. But it does describe a lot of businesses and universities and churches and schools, and I have worked with people in all of these fields. And what I find is even jobs that you might think are super cool, like I work with a multi-platinum recording artists, and there's disengagement there. Even these rock stars don't necessarily feel engaged 100% of the time. Now, they tour for 8 months at a time. It's kind of hard to feel engaged in every show, but disengagement happens across all dimensions, all levels of work. So, this matters to you. It's an issue right here in this very wonderful, large, and attractive group. And we need to talk about it a little bit if that's okay. There are 3 things that are really going to be, there's a lot of things, but there's 3 things I want to focus on that are essential to engagement in the workplace being strong and positive. So let's look at those for a moment. I remember when the Rubik's Cube came out, it was challenging. It was difficult. I had friends who could do it with their feet in a minute. If we're going to have meaningful, engaged work, we have to be challenged, but not challenged to a point we can't achieve our goals, we can't be successful. We want to be challenged, we want to have satisfying work, though. So if we're not properly trained, qualified, prepared, then we can find ourselves disengaged. So one of the factors is that we are able to do our job and do it well. Another factor, I put Viktor Frankl up here, if you have not read Man's Search for Meaning, or you have not read it lately, I really am going to treat like college freshmen because I have all my college freshmen read Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. If you haven't read it lately, please open that book up again. I think it's really valuable. And his focus, Viktor Frankl, who, by the way, if you don't know, is a survivor of Auschwitz, and when someone who survived a concentration camp speaks, I listen. I listen really carefully. And amazingly, I won't spoil the story, it's been out for 50 years, his story, but you will find if you read that story that he was able to find meaning even in this most horrific of circumstances. So finding meaning at work doesn't necessarily mean your work itself is meaningful. I hope it is. But if it's not, engaged employees find meaning in their workplace in some important way. They create meaning. So a couple quotes from Viktor Frankl to that effect. And finally, engaged employees and managers will have regular, positive, relational contact, interaction, connection with people. It can be coworkers, in our case it could be students, It can be outside folks who come to visit, but you will have regular, positive interactions with people that are relationally bonding. That is a very important part of this as well. Now, if you're thinking about all three of these things, having your work duties clear and challenging and satisfying, having meaning in your work, and having good relationships at work, and you had to prioritize those. They're all essential, so I'm just going to force you to prioritize them. And think about which of these matters most to engagement in the workplace. Which one would you think it would be?
Relationships.
I kind of gave it away with my title, didn't I? Let's, before you just listen to me talk about what I think is important, I've got to share with you a study I just love. This is called the Grant Study. And the reason I have this photo up here is because this study started in 1937. It is the longest longitudinal study ever done. Ever done. It took 75 years and cost $20 million. And what they did was they took the graduating classes of 1937 and 38. You can see it's a little gender unequal. But they took these classes and they studied these graduates every year of their lives until they all died or couldn't complete the study anymore. And they took all this data, I mean just so much data. And you have to remember, some of these people who graduated from Harvard, they went on to have great careers, prestigious work. Some of them even became famous, powerful. All of these people had incredible lives, I'm sure. But one of the things that stood out to the directors, there have been many directors of this study because they kept dying, They had to get new directors in place. The final director of the study compiled all of this data, and he wanted to be clear about what mattered most to these graduates. And here's what he had to say. These are 3 quotes from him. Our relationships with other people matter, and matter more than anything else in the world. And then he talks about connection and love. Relationships, connection, and love. Now, I'm a social scientist. It is very rare that we can draw a conclusion with such confidence. But in this case, I think I absolutely agree. And I hope you will let that sink in for you too. You can ignore them, we'll talk about that a little bit. You can pay attention to them, you can try to strengthen them, or you can let them weaken. But relationships matter more to you than anything else in the world. And as that middle quote points out, it's having connection with people not just in one domain, but across the domains of your life that helps to fulfill and make life meaningful. It certainly helps with engagement. Okay. Now, if relationships matter more than anything else in the world, and making connections with people across the various domains of our lives is critical to happiness, then the implications of having good relationships or bad relationships for engagement start to become more obvious. So let me talk to you a little bit about implications. First of all, you work with other people a lot. You will spend 35% of your waking life in a workplace. Now, if you can take a moment to experience depression. It's okay. I'm a therapist. I'll help you with that. But imagine, that is a lot of your life. And as you are engaged in that workplace, or disengaged, but hopefully you're engaged, you will have literally hundreds of thousands of touch points, interactions with other people. Okay? And each of those touch points, each of those interactions, I promise you, has a relational impact. Whether you know it or not, it will have an impact. What impact might it have? It's very simple. Think of it in terms of proximity. We either grow closer to the person with whom we interact, we grow more distant, or we stay right where we were before. Every interaction affects the proximity, the closeness, the intimacy of that relationship. And again, you can attend to it or you cannot. But let's make this really practical. Let's think about some ways in which those relational impacts might happen. When you say hi or good morning, whether you attend to it or not, you're either growing closer or distant or staying the same. How you say it makes a big difference. When you ask a question or you ask for help on a task, like question, that starts every conversation. It makes a relational difference. When you help a student or a coworker with a task, it has impact. When you invite a coworker to lunch, I will talk about lunches a little bit later. It has a significant relational impact. When you criticize a student or a coworker, oh yeah, there's relational consequence there, for sure. When you start or share a rumor about a coworker, it affects not only the relationship you have with that coworker, but the people with whom you share the rumor. All of these things always have a relational consequence. They either draw us closer, or they move us further, or they keep us right where we are. Now, that means something important. It's so important that some governments are even now paying more attention to the consequences of our relationships at work. This just happened this month. I find it fascinating. I've never heard of this before. But in Britain, the Prime Minister conducted a study, had a commission do a study on loneliness. And they found that 9 million people in Britain are either often or always lonely. 9 million. It's such an epidemic that Theresa May, the Prime Minister, put in place a Minister of Loneliness. I mean, it almost feels like Hogwarts here, but I mean that in all seriousness, this just happened last month in January. She appointed a minister whose responsibility is loneliness and social isolation. That is significant. But of course, social scientists, we've known about the loneliness going on in America and other places for a long time. Just a few statistics about loneliness and social isolation. I'm not going to read all these to you out loud. Pick a few. What you'll see here is there are significant, not only mental, but physical consequences for people who are socially isolated and feel lonely. In fact, it's life-threatening. And we call it a growing epidemic. It's significant for health consequences. And I know that people in this room, even now, but certainly in your past, you've experienced loneliness and social isolation in your workplace. I know for a fact our students, many of them, experience loneliness and social isolation in a severe and even life-endangering way. You interact with those people. So loneliness is one significant consequence. Now, we can pay attention to these kinds of relational impacts. And this one's a negative one. There's positive too, of course. But we can pay attention to these relational impacts, but it's hard. We often think of our work as the work, not so much the relationships. I want to mention just 3 barriers that I think are threats to our relationships being more close, more intimate, more cared for in the workplace. And then we'll talk about some ways we can improve. First of all, some of us just don't notice that there are relational needs among the people we work with. We don't see it. Or in some cases, like we see depicted here, we intentionally ignore it. We think, I'm here to do a job. I'm not here to take care of you. I'm not here to make sure you're doing well. I'm here to get tasks done. We focus so much on that first component of engagement, having meaning, good work that we're able to accomplish, that we sometimes forget that is tied to the quality of relationships with the people with whom we work. So we have to keep that connection in mind. But we can be inattentive. You can walk by, I see people walk by the homeless like this. Right? You cannot notice, either unintentionally or intentionally. But if you don't pay attention to relationships, you will have consequences for engagement. You will have social isolation. You will have loneliness. You will have things that are important to success in your workplace. Perfectionism. This is a big one for me. I just finished a book on perfectionism. This is a significant problem in the United States. And it's not just an individual problem, it's a relational problem. If you are so afraid of making a mistake relationally that you just try to stay out of relationships because it's bad to hurt someone or to get hurt yourself, I want to tell you, you can't help but be in relationships that are messy, where mistakes are made. And I also want to tell you that is absolutely okay. I know we're very hypersensitive about making mistakes and how we treat other people. No one wants to be insensitive. But every one of you right now, right here, has biases. You have implicit prejudices. You have blind spots. if you go around trying so hard not to ever offend anybody, which is good, I think we should try, but if all you focus on is never making mistakes in how you relate to other people, you will miss the opportunity that I think is wonderful to find people you have offended, or people who have offended you and reconcile. To sit down together and say, I think I just mistreated you around whatever it might be. And I feel bad about that. I would like to tell you I'm sorry. I would like to do better. Can you help me? These, we call them in our college, courageous conversations around differences that we don't fully understand or appreciate, and sometimes we even treat badly. So for perfectionists, I hated this game, by the way. Did anyone else play this game? I hated this game. The problem with this game is if you don't get that last piece in, they all go up. They all explode, right? That's perfectionism. It's like this catastrophizing. If I make one mistake, I lose everything. It's okay to make mistakes relationally as long as you find each other afterwards and do some of that reconciliation. Finally, I mentioned social isolation, but a lot of people who are struggling in their relationships at work think they're the only ones having struggle. And they don't think the people around them who seem to be happy, who are smiling, who seem to enjoy their work, are having any challenges. So that feeling of isolation, I'm the only one, I'm not going to bring it up, I'm not going to mention it to my manager. That just keeps us from doing the wonderful relational work that we can do, which we're going to talk about here in a moment. So please be mindful of your own tendencies to be inattentive, to be perfectionistic, and to feel like it's someone else's problem or it's only your problem. It is all of our problem. I don't want to make relationships a problem. I think they're wonderful. We have wonderful opportunities to have rich, connected relationships, but they can be a problem if we don't pay more attention and work on it more attention. Okay, so what can we do to overcome these barriers? The first thing I would ask you to do is to be relationship-minded. Start to alter your thinking away from just tasks, away from your work responsibilities, away from the emergencies that arise every day at work, unless relational emergencies, and pay attention to the relational consequences of your interaction with other people every day. Notice how you interact with people, what it does to that proximity. After you walk away from a talk with somebody, do you feel closer to them? Do you feel farther from them? Or do you feel like nothing's changed? Be attentive. See how it feels. Notice it. You can do it. It's subtle, the relational kind of current that flows beneath all of our work. But you can attend to it and notice it. Make it intentional. Make it your business. As I said before, expect mistakes. Expect messiness. I came in as a new department chair in July. Man, I've made mistakes. I've hurt people. They've hurt me. And we've had to find each other. And I'll tell you that finding each other and me saying I'm sorry, or them saying I'm sorry, or we're both saying I'm sorry, has produced a stronger bond. I can tell you I feel closer. I can tell you that in my own marriage, I feel closer to my wife because of the struggles we've gone through together than because of the easier good times. There is value in appreciating the messiness of relationships and finding each other to work through them. Don't keep your relational struggles private. That isolation we talked about before, that feeling you're the only one, it just isn't true. Everyone in the workplace is dealing with challenging relationships. Not everyone might feel as lonely as you do, or as angry as you do, but everyone in the workplace is dealing with challenges around their relationships. So it's okay to share. And we have so many resources here in West Georgia. So many resources. We have the Ombuds Office. We have HR. We have UWG Cares. We have the Employee Assistance Program. You have supervisors. You have people who are just colleagues. You have all sorts of resources where you can go and say, I'm having a hard time. What can I do? How can I make this better? So please don't stay in a private, isolated way around this. How are we doing on time? I'm just moving along. I'm great. You're enjoying it? We just got closer. We're close to you right now. You want to get lunch after? Okay. My place is just distracted me so much. here's what typically happens. As people start to get more relationally minded, they start to see relational problems everywhere. You know, it's like, oh my gosh, I don't remember he's lonely. The world's going to get hard. And they want to do big, grand gestures to resolve it. You know, they want to like take everybody out on a retreat. We're going to spend 3 days together, locked into a room, and we're not coming out until we all hug each other and sing Kumbaya. And once we sing Kumbaya, I will know we're good, you know, and I'll check it off the list, and we'll have relationships for good forever. Oh, please, 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 do not do that. Couple things. Relational work cannot be forced, and it cannot be artificial. If it is false, you will be detected. Okay? When you pretend, how are you today? I know I never asked you that question before in my life, but I care today. Does it have anything to do with the fact that we just heard about relationships in the meeting? You know, we've got to be thoughtful about the natural ways in which we can do this. And we have to have very modest and reasonable expectations of ourselves. So let me make sure I'm on the right slide here. Yeah. I don't know if you've seen one about Bob. Dr. Leo Marvin, played by Richard Dreyfuss, is a psychiatrist. His famous book he's so proud of called Baby Steps. As it's made fun of in the movie, it's okay, but it really is a good principle. We're not, I would ask you not to look for grand gestures and massive change overnight. I would ask you to practice incremental, relational, intentional change. Little things, folks. Very little things. You don't have to do a big, grand retreat. It's great. They're nice. I'm not against them. But you don't have to do that to affect a relationship in a positive way. So please let yourselves think of natural and modest little things you can do. And here I go. Remember, it is often the little things. Now, I intentionally chose this picture because it's people eating together. My philosophy of teaching, my philosophy of being, you can tell, has to do with eating together. Since I began teaching in, 1997 probably, I've always eaten together with my students. Whether it's a potluck in class, whether we meet together in a, Z6 or whatever, whether we find a conference room and brown bag it, I've always eaten with my students. Eating together is called by many anthropologists the social glue of society. It's certainly the social glue of families. We know that families that eat together have all sorts of benefits, psychological, social, and personal. Interestingly, there's been a study recently done on fire departments. And fire departments where the firefighters eat together not only have better relationships, they perform better than fire departments where they eat alone. So I have eaten together with students for years, and to me it's a simple and easy thing. I need to eat, you need to eat. That's very natural. Why don't we eat together? And the students have really appreciated this. And one particular example that just really struck me on this front was I got you get those notices when students graduate of impacts they've had during their time. And I just got this note. I didn't even know about this student having this experience, but it meant so much to me that this student had moved from feeling as a new freshman, so this was when the student was a freshman taking intro psych from me, that this student was eating alone the first semester. She had me the second semester. I was able to talk to her later about this. She said she was planning to drop out from the university because she couldn't stand it. She had to eat lunch alone every day. I had no idea that I was meeting a relational need for this very lonely student. But it turned out that having a place to go to lunch and getting to know a professor, by the way, my lunches are not work lunches, they're relational lunches. We just hang out. We laugh, we joke, we just, enjoy each other. And she started not only to become friends with other folks who were coming, which she told me she would spend the rest of her university experience eating with those kids, so she wasn't alone. But she also formed a relationship with me that was stronger than just teacher-student. She became my friend too. And again, I didn't even think of her. No offense, I didn't tell her that. I didn't even know you existed. But I did remember, and we did connect. But it was meaningful to have more than just teacher-student. So these little things. Now I started Nelson Meals. We're in Nelson Hall, and I started inviting different groups to come and eat lunch with me in my chair's office. We've had our faculty come, and it's interesting. There are some faculty. One of them even told me when I started out. She said, "Just so you know, I don't trust you at all." Okay. I never worked with her before. Like she was hired when I had been away, and I didn't know her, and she said, "I just don't trust you." There's no offense to you. I don't really trust anybody. And the previous chair was very untrustworthy. It just kept up. And I thought I could, ignore it, be inattentive. I could be a perfectionist, try to say all the right things. I could just treat her like she's the only one, and no one else has that problem, so you're on your own. But it was important to me that she was able to express to me that concern. I actually was appreciative that she told me she didn't trust me, because it was an opportunity. And I started meeting with her individually, and just not to, give her job assignments. I started to meet with her and just talk with her and find out what's going on. And then we started, doing these lunches, and she's come to lunches, and she's having a great time. She's laughing, she's smiling, she seems to trust me, I don't know. But things have improved. And so what I'm doing now is I'm meeting with faculty, with students. I've met with the other chairs in my college. I'm going to meet with the dean and her staff, and eventually going to have Student Affairs Enrollment Management come for lunch. Not all of you. I can't afford all of you. I have my own children to feed, you understand. But I'll have a select group of you. Okay, you'll be there. So let me ask you in conclusion, let's take a moment, if you don't mind. I'm just going to ask you to get a piece of paper out or your note-taking phone app. I know you all have one of those. And you're going to do just a very simple thing. You're going to jot down 2 or 3 things that are small, simple, easy, but relationally focused that you can do in your workplace. Maybe you could even do one today that would allow for the possibility. You can't control relationships, but allow for the possibility that you and a coworker or you and a student might feel a little closer rather than farther, and you might not just stay the same, you might strengthen your relational bond. 2 to 3 simple little baby steps. Okay, keep writing if you need to, but I'm going to wrap up, and I'm going to personalize this a little bit, so please forgive me, but I only know how to relate to relationships personally. The reason that this student's comment struck me so much was that it harkened back to my high school experience. Now, I believe the age of 13 is the worst age on the planet. It's so hard. Your arms are the size of adults, but your torso is still a child's torso. It's not pleasant. But as bad as 13 was for me in junior high, 15 almost did me in. I went to a high school called SAEM High School, California. It is a very violent place. There is a lot of gang activity. When I would walk into school, I would look at the sidewalk and never look up. Because there would be, I'll just tell you, they're called cholos. There would be these gang members that would squat down like this, and it would be like that. And if you looked at them, that was it. That day you were going to get beat up, for sure, and maybe worse. Unfortunately, I knew people who killed, and I knew people who had been killed, and my experience there was just going downhill fast, and I was feeling horrible. And I wrote poetry in my English class in which I mentioned suicide. And when that happened, so my teacher got very upset, counselor got involved, my parents came along, and next thing you know, I was transferred to a different high school. And this high school was in a different city, and this high school was the polar opposite of the high school I'd been at. It was one of the wealthiest high schools in the nation. And I was a pretty poor white kid, so I was like, not fitting in there at all. Some days I thought I'd rather be back with the gangs. I mean, there's some intimacy in getting beat up by someone. There isn't, I've been through it, it's not pleasant. But these kids were rich. They would get dropped off by limousine sometimes to school. I'm not making that up. Some of them would drive in Porsches and Rolls Royces. And those were different cars they drive each day, same kid. So I couldn't find a way in. And from my sophomore year, the middle of my sophomore year, until the middle of my junior year, I ate lunch alone every day. Every single day. Now, at the time, I was into this movie called Reber Without a Cause, starring James Dean, which is the story of a guy who knows how to make being a loner and a reject extremely cool. It is. The guy oozes coolness. So I tried to put on the persona of, I want to eat lunch alone because I'm cool like that. But what was really going on in my heart was I was dying every day. I was dying every day. And if it wasn't for one student, one day, coming and sitting next to me at the table I was at, all alone, I'm quite certain I wouldn't be here in front of you. This matters to me at a deeply personal level. And I am not alone. Your students, some of them are playing the James Dean card, but they are not feeling like James Dean. I'm not sure James Dean felt like James Dean. So please, I tell my kids this all the time. I say, you know what would make your dad most happy? I don't care what you achieve in life. If you see a kid alone, you sit down with that kid. That would make me happier than anything on the planet. I promise you, relationships matter, and they matter more than anything in the world. Thank you.
Embarrassing, but thank you very much. That's awesome. That is a therapy session for all of you. That's only going to be $125 each as you go out the door. So, but thank you, Jeff. That was great. Appreciate you being who you are and being here at West Georgia. Again, we continue. If you don't know, Jeff was here once before. He left, and then he came back because we're so awesome.
That's true.
That is true. But we're glad to have you back and glad you're part of this team. I want to do one more thing. Cannot compete with that. I'm just telling you. But one more thing. I want to give a quick shout out. Everybody is doing just awesome, fantastic work. But there is a group in our area that is really putting it out there and kind of in a place that's a little more unsafe maybe than the rest of us. And that's health services. They are, so I don't know where you are over here, if you can stand up. Anybody from health services that are putting themselves, you put this thing called flu, right? And put themselves in the building where that is going on every day. And so just want to say that. I know it's happening throughout our campus and other people are doing a lot of work to keep our campus safe and keep our students as healthy as possible. So thank you very much, and thank all of you. Also, where's Amber? Amber has an announcement before we go.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. This is my flash guy. Yeah, it should be there. So, hi. I wanted to tell you all a little bit about the order forms that you see on your tables. Before I do that, while they're getting the actual picture pulled up, I'll just tell you a little bit about myself. My name is Reber. I am the graduate assistant in Housing and Residence Life for our assignment team. I'm also a second-year master's student in our college Student Affairs program. And within that program, we actually have a student organization called Graduate Student Affairs Professionals, or GSAP. And that's kind of an organization that is by student affairs grads for student affairs grads. And it's headed up by 4 coordinators, which include myself, Roger Newell, Ashley Owens, and Megan Sullivan. And so throughout the year, we just focus a lot on providing and planning and organizing events for everybody that's in our CSA program. So whether that's general meetings or additional professional development opportunities, social events, things of that nature. We also have a lot of work in planning our convocation and pudding ceremonies for each of the cohorts. So each year, GSAP does a fundraiser for the SAEM division, and this year we are selling coffee mugs, which you can see on the order form, and we're getting pulled up here. I'll find it. Oh, that's anyway, so yeah, they look a lot like what's on there. They are a rich cobalt blue with a white speckled finish. They are 16-ounce coffee mugs, and they have UWG, SAEM. It also says Student Affairs Enrollment Management. That's 20% that's over there. Sorry, what did you say? Okay. But yeah, so the mugs will be sold for $10 a piece. You can set them on your desk, use them as a snazzy pen holder. They're a great welcome to the office presence, or they can just hold your morning cup of coffee or two. Payments can be made in cash to me. You can fill out an order form and bring it by the housing office. My desk is right in the front, first floor of East Commons. I work Monday through Thursday, 8 a.m. to 1 p.m. Or you can pay on Venmo. So Megan Sullivan, her account will be receiving Venmo payments. And if you would just send your amount over and include your name, your department, and just GSAP coffee mug in the payment description, you don't have to worry about your personal information being on that public newsfeed that's on Venmo. Megan has her settings set to where that info is just available to her. So the last day to order the mugs will be the Friday before spring break, which is March 16th, and then they will be available for pickup at the next divisional meeting, which is Thursday, April 12th. So, okay, didn't find a picture, but maybe we can get it sent out in an email. Okay, so you can see the wonderful blue, lovely color that it is. So anyway, that's all the information for that. We really hope that you will consider supporting GSAP. If you have any other questions about the fundraiser or just GSAP in general, or if you need an order form, please feel free to see me after the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So just for clarification, she said that this is a fundraiser for Student Affairs Enrollment. It's not for our division. It's actually for GSAP. Yeah, it's for GSAP. We're good. Our budget's okay. We're okay. We got it. We're resorting to selling coffee mugs. That's great. Yeah, we're going to be talking about your raises soon, so yeah, buy your mugs. We'll get back to you. Okay. So anyway, that's any other announcements? We've got just a few more minutes. Any other announcements? Yeah, go ahead. Can you just shout it out?
So just so everyone knows, you've probably seen flyers all around campus. University Recreation and Graduate Assistants are throwing a Mardi Gras 5K, not this Saturday, but a week from Saturday, the 17th. We're going to do it at the athletic complex. $25 for faculty and staff. If you have students, it's $10. They can sign up at the UREC webpage. It's going to be really fun. It's going to be Mardi Gras themed. You know, if you're just looking to have a fun race, but there's also some competition piece to it. We're going to have a timing system. So if you're interested in that, you can reach out to any of us or just sign up online. Thank you.
Just real quick, Student Employee of the Year nominations is open until February 15th. If you have any questions, please direct those questions to Ms. Mary Beth Phillips. And if you have great student assistants, please nominate them. They work really hard for us.
Awesome. Thank you. Any other announcements?
Yeah, not inviting you to lunch, but resident assistant and pre-village aid applications are live. They've been live for about 2 weeks. If you have any student leaders, please encourage them to apply. Those applications do close tomorrow, so make sure they get that in with interviews happening next week. So if you have any phenomenal student leaders that you want me to personally email, please see me after this, and I'm happy to send that email from the Housing and Residence Life.
Awesome. Any other announcements? Okay, well, thank you all very much. Let's give one last round of applause to Jeff Reber.